Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. I am super thrilled to have the founder of Zync.ai, which we are recording this episode on, Arjun. I'm going to butcher your last name, so I'll just say Arjun S. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Annika. I'm excited to be here on the show.
I've had the pleasure of being interviewed by somebody else on your platform, and I wanted to know more. And so I'm starting to test it out. I'm really excited about all of the different opportunities you have. But before we talk about Zync, let's talk about how you got here. Were you always a tech founder and creator?
Yeah, my background's pretty much been in tech. I'm an engineer by training. I spent a good part of my career working in the big techs, Microsoft, and did my tour of duty over there for 8 years. And then I moved on to the world of that itch to move to San Francisco, start a company. I did that thing, moved from Seattle to San Francisco. Worked for a smaller company for a couple of years, then was an entrepreneur in residence, and then started my first company way back. And then this Zync is my second startup, which I started right around in the middle of the pandemic about 3 years back.
What was your first startup?
My first startup is called Ambit. We were using AI. Again, at that point of time, it was more machine learning. We were using voice technology. What we were trying to do is understand how teams and people communicate with each other. We were working largely with schools, Harvard Business School was one of our clients, Melbourne Business School was a client, where we would help teams understand how people communicate with each other using AI. So we would put a microphone, analyze everybody's voice, who's talking, who's listening, the turn taking and everything, and give people analytics on how they would do. Yeah, it found success in the educational environment. We were trying to bring it to the work environment. These were pre-Zoom days. We were trying to put a microphone in people's conference rooms. It just did not take off as much as we thought we would be able to do.
And then what caused the pivot to Zync? And what exactly is Zync?
Yeah, Zync was actually, it's a brand new company. It was not quite a pivot, but still some of the remnants of that idea still stayed, in that when people moved from all types of meetings, from board games to board meetings were happening virtually, we figured that there is more interesting ways in which people can come together. How can you change the design of the environment in a way that helps people communicate better, interact better? Is kind of what we started with when we started Zync. So it's a wordplay on how to sync and sync. But when over the years we started looking at which of the use cases Zync was becoming more valuable, and the idea of these meetings or events and podcast style interviews that people came together, and then how do you convert that into content started resonating. So sometime a year back, we decided that that's what we're going to be focusing on. And so we launched Zync as a podcast studio with an content production, video content production backed by AI sometime last year.
Yeah, nice. And talk to me about the back end. So when this episode is completed, what do I need to do to edit it and to push it out to social media, to get it up on the RSS feed?
Yeah, so that's kind of where the magic of Zync's AI kicks in, is when you are having this episode right now, you can actually transform this experience to multiple different modes. So even right now, you're in more of a speaker introduction. You'd see there is a timeline where you can jump into this open discussion, which will kind of put us both in side to side. So you can go ahead and click on that part right now. And what happens is we transform this, and we understand, because we have the recording studio, we understand everything that's happening in this, and we look at what is being spoken, and you can inform the audience what was some moment that you found interesting. And so we're taking all these data that's coming in an episode and converting this into a content kit. And we say content kit because it comes with websites, blog posts, and automatically created streams of videos, which is called, we call it the highlight feed of smaller, short, bite-sized video clips. And we take those video clips and convert them into social media posts across the board for YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and format it for like portrait, squares, and everything for these different channels, and like have it like immediately be available after your episode is completed. We do like offer like a little bit of editing, so you can actually go ahead and like tweak what it is. But our goal is that people are too busy to spend time video editing it. So we offer live editing, and when the episode is done, you have the content kit available to you within the matter of like say minutes, maybe an hour or so tops.
Nice. That's just such a time saver.
Yeah, I think the time saver is definitely one way to think about it, because the really good podcasters are doing this already with like a team of people spending a lot of money, spending a lot of time, and like they're doing this part. But the majority of the people just don't redistribute it. They actually like release the episode, like they put it on like maybe Apple or Spotify, and that's it.
Yeah.
You're sitting on a wealth of content which comes from just these conversations. And so Zync is just unlocking that wealth of content available to you to like make it available on like social media and everything. So we see it both as like a time saver for people who are already doing it, and as a way to like unlock the content for those who are just not utilizing this.
Yeah. Well, and this platform also offers the opportunity to do live sessions or workshops, not just podcasts, correct?
That's right. So we have a mode where you can live stream this. So it's like, as we are talking, as you can see how this is all transformed. So you can add more interactive sessions and then live stream this. You can also bring in a live audience. So this is a way for you to run a webinar or like workshop style where you have a live audience, and there it's not just, visual changes, but you can make it interactive. So there is like an opinion poll or a word cloud that you can actually embed within your experience, makes it for an engaging way to interact with your audience, and then also take those moments and convert it into content for your social media as well. So it's a workshop as well as a podcast studio.
Yeah. Well, and I know on other platforms that do podcast hosting, they will connect, but you have to still go in and, connect to Spotify, connect to Apple Podcasts. You have to make sure that the RSS feed is showing up on all of the different platforms. Is that the same case with this platform?
So there's a one time where at the launch of your show, you would like set it up such that like your Spotify and your Apple Podcast and everything is connected. So you would do that. And once that's set up, we have like very clear instructions on how to go about with that. And once that is set up, then afterwards, like on ongoing, it's just automatically publishing to like each of these episodes. Nice. You can make it so it doesn't automatically publish. So you review it and then like publish it. So it's like one click away. But the reason it's one way is only because you want to review it, because it's not possible to automatically publish it.
Yeah. I'm just thinking through all the things that podcasters need to know and be aware of, and the different systems that we have to use to do all of these. Because I don't know of any other platform, but I'd love to hear if you have competitors that is truly all-in-one like this, where you not only are a podcast hosting platform, production, and then also social media marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know many that are like truly all-in-one, but there are like many competitors who are doing a part of this. I mean, people who might be familiar with like, Zoom or like Riverside is actually like one of the main competitors that does like the whole recording studio where you can go and like record the platform and get the raw video output of it. And then there are like some other platforms who are doing like sort of the back end of it, which is where like you give them a video that will like try to chop it up and create that. We are all in one, like, besides the recording studio and the content production, we also help you manage your guest speakers and like send them a content kit after that's done so they can promote it in their audience. So we try to make it truly end to end. That said, there are like some competitors who do like the small parts of it really well as well. Like Cast Magic is one that comes to mind that does like the more video production part of it as well. Yeah, there are like tools. But the advantage is that like because we are the recording studio, we have more information that we can use when we are producing the content that you wouldn't have if you are just one part of it.
Yeah, 100%. And what are the different options? Because you have podcasts, you talked about webinars, live streams. We also, before we jumped on, we're talking about solo studio.
Yeah.
And then you also have the done for you. So there's a lot of different options here.
Absolutely. So the done for you is what we offer for more bigger companies, where we give you a producer that helps you launch your show, everything from ideation of your show to coming up with like who should be your guest speakers, helping invite those guest speakers, and like creating some promotion around your show and everything else as well. So like that's a done for you solution. We offer that. Whereas the Solo Studio is something that's a new product that we're launching. This is for people who are realizing that video content is one of the more authentic ways in which you can start building your audience. They're not quite ready to launch a podcast and like the work that goes along with that, but they want to get started on video content. Mostly the behavioral aspects of like, I want to do it. I have this idea, but like I just never get around to doing that part. We've all been there. So the Solo Studio is a way for every week, spend like 15 minutes and like we would like queue up about 5 or 6 questions that your audience care about. You just go into the studio, answer those questions, and then we would take that and convert it into content with like all the captions and the logos and everything associated with that. So you are like having content to post every day by just spending 15 minutes a week. And so that's kind of what Solo Studio is about.
Yeah. It's amazing to me how quickly things are changing and evolving. What do you see as the next landscape for this world of like tech and AI and podcasting and virtual content?
Yeah, with video becoming LinkedIn is like almost on the verge of launching their own video tab in their mobile device. So it's almost like a TikTok, Instagram style, like vertical video competitor. It's in the cards. They've been like at it for a while right now. But once that comes up, this idea of like people producing video content is going to just like completely like balloon out of proportion. So that's one thing that we're really like excited about. I personally think that there's going to be like some that's going to be in this automatic video generation part of it. And I'm not too big a fan of that, like where like, it's going to create video on your behalf using AI. The reason why these videos are doing well, short form videos, because of that authentic connection when a real person comes and talks. And so like taking that away from it might be like a bit of a, like there's going to be like too much content and like low quality content. And so I'd probably say I'm not too excited about that part of it, but it's bound to happen. But I think if you were to think about AI as a assistant, I would imagine that like AI replacing you is not the great way, but like AI becoming an assistant in doing that research to come up with what are the good questions, or like AI becoming an assistant to go doing the editing for you, or AI becoming an assistant to go and give you like indications on like what is good content and everything, like, your director assistant or something. That's probably where I feel like AI as these different roles are perfect fit for AI. And I'm excited about all of those things.
Yeah. And what have you learned in the 3+ years that you have been working on developing founder and CEO of Zync?
Yeah, I mean, quite a few learnings. Again, like I come from like a very technical background. So like the entire idea of like building software, B2B creator facing software has been like a big learning from. But in general, I would say that like this probably goes a little bit philosophical or so, is that like, there's a huge roller coaster when it comes to like starting a company or so, like that whole mindset shift it takes to like being an entrepreneur, like sort of sticking it for the long game. And like, that's probably the biggest learning I would say for in the last 3 years or so.
Yeah. And you're also a podcast host yourself.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. In fact, like I started hosting a podcast even before we launched this as a podcast platform, because I was realizing that like podcast hosting was one of the most easiest way to like do customer as an early stage entrepreneur, like, like a very, very easy way to like do customer discovery, get meetings with your prospects and like have a more open discussion with them about the topics that they know and discover the problems that they have was just an awesome opportunity. So I launched a show over there and that's when like I kind of realized that like the amount of work it goes on to like producing a show like that. We were hosting a show and then like I had hired somebody who would like, schedule this and do that and like produce the video, and like we were getting for people to do this part. And we figured like, like Zync does most of these things, and so we should be able to do that. And so that's kind of how we started upon this. But my understanding of podcast hosting has changed significantly as well in the last 3 years since I started becoming a host. I think in 2 main ways, I would say. One is that this primarily as a channel for you to like build relationships is like a better way to think of it than like, just primarily content. That's something that's come together. Like, every conversation that you're having, you're building a relationship with that guest speaker that comes together. That's an important part that I want to emphasize. And then in some ways, creating podcast is almost easier than like, just going and trying to like speak about your ideas, because natural conversation that comes with the form of just questions and answers is so much more intuitive and easy for people. So I would say that, like, for people who are worrying about like how hard it would be to host podcasts, I did it. I'm like a very, very typical engineer by training. And so if I could do it, then like anybody can do it.
Well, I appreciate that, because it's funny. I feel like I'm surrounded by a lot more technical people now. A lot of people are the founders, and I'm definitely not that person. I'm like the idea, I want to teach people about stuff, but I don't want to, my brain doesn't immediately go to engineering and how to put something together, like in the same way that you would put it together.
No, I mean, I think this is, again, like I probably should like niche down to like just engineering centric founders, because I would like have a lot to say. Because you can ask me about like, hey, just give a good video, and that would like put me in like sort of deer in headlights feeling. But if you just ask me a casual question about like, it's like, how does AI apply to this? And then like you ask me that question, I can go on for like 2 minutes, just talk about it with all enthusiasm. And you can see that in my voice and my presentation. And so this whole idea of like, being on video could be simplified quite a bit. And there's just behavior. I'm a little bit of a behavior science nerd as well. So like I think about like, how can you put people at ease when it comes to like talking about this? How can you make it a habit, and how can you like get going on this? So I feel like there's just a lot that software can help, especially AI can help in making people better, better podcast hosts, better guest speakers, and also just better solo video personalities as well.
Yeah, for sure. I want to hear more about the lessons you learned in your first startup and how they helped shape your second startup.
Yeah, I mean, I think the couple of them that I would say is the people, like, like the founded team that you bring together, and like how you well work together is super essential. Like many startups, like make or break. I spent a lot of cycles in my first startup in just aligning and getting people aligned, and we spent enough energy on that like, the amount of energy we spent on like external activities was like less. And so that I would say was like a big lesson, is in like finding that perfect co-founder team, or like even if it's not perfect, like something that you feel more comfortable with. That's one of the biggest things that I learned. And I'd say the second thing was you could get a lot of validation without having to build a product, without having to do a lot of the work, especially like in a sales centric world, sell a product that you don't have and then be able to go ahead and like build that, like sort of think about it very differently. All that was like very big learnings from like my first startup, which helped a lot and for us to like iterate, try out like different ideas in my current startup.
Yeah. And what about funding? Because I've heard different things about the funding landscape. Did you have to go after funding? Because I know I've heard everybody's looking for the next AI tool, right? The next big AI company to fund through VC, but a lot of those companies, some do really well, some can't compete, right?
Right. Yeah, we went through fundraising. So I raised a small seed round with Google's Gradient Ventures is one of our investors. And then there's another venture company called Madrona Ventures, who's based in Seattle, where I am right now. And so they are my two big founders, and then we have like a bunch of other founders. As a method to fundraising, I would say that like it's not a fun job for any founder, but especially like first-time founders, it's actually like a pretty hard. Depending on the kind of company, you could be getting a lot of validation even while bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is for you to be able to do it without having to raise funding. So you could bootstrap and still like get a lot of validation, and then like use those validation as proof to go raise money. But if you're building like larger B2B products, then like raising a seed round might be the only way that you can get a product off the ground. Totally depends. I think people shouldn't be afraid of fundraising. There are many investors who are looking for very talented people. For first-time founders, if you have to ask, there's like probably like 2 or 3 things that like investors are looking at. They don't care about your product. Very funnily, like, it's like your product doesn't matter as much. The people behind it matters. Like your team, your founding team matters a lot. Your vision on like what you have and like kind of your attitude towards that matters a lot. The product is bound to evolve, and it must evolve. Like you can't, like you'll be like extremely lucky if you say that like the first product that you put out there is going to be like a super success. Like it has to go through iterations and everything. So if the team is good and the vision is good, and you seem like you have the right attitude about building a company, That's what most VCs are looking for when it comes to this. There's also angel investing. There's also like smaller VCs who write like smaller checks. There's a method to this. I can go on for a whole like hour talking about just fundraising strategy and tactics about it. But I would say that like the main thing to focus on is getting a good team and like getting your vision lined up for you.
And I've heard a lot about, startup competitions and people being in incubators. Did you go through that process?
Not for this startup. I was part of Techstars Alexa Accelerator when I did my previous AI startup. So like Amazon Alexa, they had an accelerator over here in Seattle. I was part of that and last went for my previous startup. And I've been through some other smaller, like these accelerator incubator style things and everything. A little bit jaded right now, given like I've been through that. I wouldn't say that they're like completely like useless or something like that, but I would say that like the biggest things that I got from that is the connections that I made from the cohort that I was part of and the people that were also in the same bucket and like what you learned from that. These things all are helpful for a small degree, but like these days, there's nothing that you cannot like learn if you put your mind to it. But just being that part of that cohort, again, I go to a behavioral science thing about it is that like, some people are like motivated by like seeing other people who are doing it along with them and that motivates them. If you're that kind of person, then like a cohort or like an accelerator is super useful for you. But if you are like sort of you can learn by yourself or like you can do this, probably is not worth the time and worth the hustle. Sometimes their priorities might be different from what you have to do. And they will sort of shoehorn you into like one way of doing things. And so it may not be like the right fit for your right time. But in general, like a cohort helps. Sometimes it gives you status. These days that are less and less like, you went through YC, so you get opening to like a lot of these things. And so there are like some prestigious accelerators that exist that might still be worth it for that brand value, I would say. But other than that, like these things are not, I'm a bit jaded, but I've been through them right now. Yeah.
Well, and I know tech founders who are the non-technical side, right? And so they had to find somebody to build the tech. How important is it to be a technical founder or to know that, have that knowledge? Or is it just better to, like you said, build the right team, find the right people who complement your skill set?
Yeah, these days, I would probably say like the role of a technical founder should be more to like guide and accelerating the process of development, unless you're developing core AI, right? Like, something that is patentable, something that you cannot be built and like your almost differentiator is that. Unless you're building that, if you're doing that, then you need to be a very strong technical team and like you're kind of solving something that is not solved so far from a technical perspective. Then you need a really strong technical team. You have to find that co-founder. And there are so many of them. Like, believe me, like when I was at Microsoft, like I meet people at Microsoft and like, these big organizations are so strong technically, but they have no idea what it means to like run a startup or like be a part of it. And they would love to take a shot at like working in a smaller company or like starting a company themselves as well. So that's actually like, I would say that makes sense if you are looking at a core technical company. But if you're developing many different types of companies these days, there's just like many ways to get started with like a remote team. You need to find one technical person who would be like the anchor who can manage these things. They need not be like a strong technical, but like someone who, they should be strong technical, but they need not be like a AI expert or anything like that. They should be able to manage a team that's remote or so. And like you can get a lot done with like very little money as well. There are some really good talent across the world that you can actually like hire from and then build a remote first team as well. So you can get a lot going.
Yeah. And do you see that more in the founder space of building teams that are remote? Maybe you have some people in the Philippines or in India or in different countries, and that makes it easier to go to market faster and get the work done?
Yeah. Ours is a remote first team. We have teams in like, across the world. Like we have some in India, we have some in Poland. Like, it's kind of like the typical remote first team that you would think of. Again, it takes a bit of a culture and appetite for you to be able to set that up and then like have it working. Thankfully for us, we spent some enough time in the initial phase investing in like a remote first startup, and then it's worked out really well for us. There's like a bit of culture building that has to go with it. Again, like it depends on the founder's style. Like many people are like, early stage startups, you got to all be in the same room, come in and do like 12 hours and like everybody should be here. And like, every day you're like grind, the startup grind. There are some people who do that. Like, first time founders, I feel like attempt to go around that grind. Now that I've done this a couple of times or like done it the second time doing this, like I'm less about that and more about like giving people that space and trust to like go do their things and then be able to like just sync up a couple of hours every day and then like be able to like make sure that everything is like lined up. It's again, like, different people, different styles, but this can definitely happen. And I think this would save you money for sure. And at the same time, I don't know if it's at like a cost of efficiency or anything.
Yeah, that's a great point for people to think about when they're building out their teams. I want to ask, because Zync is a lesser known name than, say, a StreamYard or Riverside or a Zoom or some of these other platforms. How do you compete and how are you leveraging some of these relationships that you've met, people you've met, to get Zync into the hands of more consumers?
Yeah, it's a big challenge. And I think some of it is eating our own dog food, like, building a brand around what we are doing ourselves. And so like these things take time and like you slowly go after smaller chunks at a time. I think for us in the stages that we are in right now, we are like growing is for us to establish that the product works really well for like a bunch of people and that like we can feel really good about like the value that we deliver. I think we offer something that is not offered by other people. So we carve out the niche and then like keep an eye open for making sure that like we're solving some of the upcoming problems. Like, for example, videos taking off, we're solving some of those problems. And so we hit that wave when that comes and then like ride it as we go and stay alive until we hit that wave is kind of like our goal for what I would say is like, and then obviously once you get to a bit of traction, you can always invest in marketing, invest in like a lot of these things to like accelerate it. But like our idea is to like be more organic, be more content first, be more inbound first, and try to build a brand around like Zync right now. Takes time, takes patience, and I think we have to like survive until like we get to the point where this one is a much more valuable option than many of the other things that are out there.
Yeah. I think that's something, as in recent conversations I've been having over the past week, if people are not natural entrepreneurs, they don't understand. I have conversations with people who look at me and say, well, you've been working on this thing or that thing. I'm like, yeah, and it takes time to build these.
Right.
Becoming a top podcaster didn't happen overnight. I've been doing it for over 4 years. Like, you have to give yourself that time to build. And I think it's really frustrating for people who might be our friends or our partners who see that, but they don't really understand that this is really intentional and we are grinding it and building out our programs, our processes. We're iterating, we're testing, we're revising, we're getting it out there. Yeah. I mean, I think the whole like power of compounding, right? Like, investments or like whether it is in these things, it's true. You need to put your work in and like be able to make sure that like you stay there consistent over a period of time and then like wait to reap the rewards of it. The way that like, again, I wouldn't say I have like success. There are sometimes when like everybody feels impatient that like, oh my God, like, it's like I'm not able to reap the rewards of it right away. Like, I've been there. I know I sometimes feel like that even right now. But I think the better way is like shifting it to more of a systems level thinking to say that like we measure our success in terms of like the input rather than the output. I try to see like, it's like, hey, did we make 30 posts this week? Did we have like 10 podcast episodes this quarter? Like, think about it from like that perspective. And that should be the goal that you're measuring against and like inform success about. And then the output automatically happens or like trust the process that the output automatically happens there. It's really hard. I think businesses are like not built that way or like don't work like that. The people are like thinking like, where is my ROI? How am I going to like do that? But in the content world, people realize that it's not going to give you like instant gratification. These things take time to like build. Yeah, there are like many ways in which people can start to feel good about it. Like these vanity metrics of like, oh, I see my like audience grow. Like these vanity metrics are like obviously there to like make you feel good, but ultimately like the ROI comes over after a period of time. Better to probably see some of the more successful people like yourself and like some of the other people who have done this and like amassed like quite a bit of following and have built businesses just like like millions and like $billion businesses just on top of their personal brand. Just like look at how they have done it successfully. Probably like the only way to feel good about doing this grind as you're going through it. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I just think that everybody needs to really think through the process. And I love that you said to set strong KPIs, strong metrics around and set these goals, set these benchmarks so that you know what progress you're making. Because if you don't set any benchmarks, any KPIs, then you're not really going in any one direction.
Yeah. And yeah, sometimes it's tempting to like set these more like, we should get so many leads, and that's sometimes very hard, but like setting these KPIs to be more input based is like the best way to do when it comes to content. Of course, when it comes to like other things, you might want to set it more output based, but here it's better to set these more based on the effort that you're taking and the process that you're following.
Yeah. Arjun, is there anything else you want to share about Zync, about being a founder, tech startup world? Anything else that you think is really important for people to think about as they're entering the world of entrepreneurship or continuing their journey?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the one thing that I would say is like, this is probably true both with like entrepreneurship and with like podcasting is you learn a lot by doing than by like thinking about it and like trying to do this, like just experimenting smaller experiments that are okay to fail, giving permission yourself to fail, and then like changing it. And it's okay to like try something and then like change your mind about it and like move on in a different direction. Just giving yourself permission to say that that's okay is probably like the best step, and like get started, jump in, do things is better than like, I've been thinking about this idea for 3 years is for sure.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite quote, mantra, words of wisdom that help you get through and inspire you every day?
One thing that I keep saying, this might feel a little dystopian or so, but like someone who was climbing Mount Everest, they talked about it is that like, it's another cold, dark night at the side of Mount Everest is another way to think about like how many days in startups are where like you don't have the fame, you don't have it as either it's like a really terrible cold night and like you're there in like the side of Mount Everest climbing it, and then like people are like often recognize you in that like glory where you're like in the summit, but there are so many nights that you're spending on the cold, dark side of like Mount Everest. So I would say that sometimes that perspective helps to get me through. Yeah.
Wow. And the best way for people to contact you and learn more about the different capabilities in Zync, should they just go to the website? Should they find you on LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is probably easier. Connect with me. Let me know that you found me through this podcast, so I have some context for sure. And then if you want to talk about either entrepreneurship or starting a company or like starting a podcast or like getting your brand built on social media, I'm happy to guide you with whatever knowledge I have.
Awesome. And I will have your profile in the show notes for everybody. So Arjun, thank you so much for giving your time to us today. I really appreciate it. And I know that everybody got a lot of insight out of this episode.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me on the show.
And to everybody who's watching or listening to this episode, I'll be back again in a few days with another amazing guest to share their story and their journey to help you become a better entrepreneur every day. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.